This is the third video lecture on the topic of sex and gender. We left off talking about social stratification and what it means to say that women are a minority group. To say that women as a minority group simply means that they have less power. And when we talk about gender stratification, if you look on your slide, we're still on the bottom of the page two, have some examples or some examples of in what ways in society women have less power. Certainly, we talked about how all over the world women are less likely to be educated. There's more legal violence or applicable violence that is legal against women. If you've ever heard the phrase rule of thumb, that goes back to some old American laws that said it was acceptable it was not illegal, so it was legal for a husband to hit his wife as long as the stick was no bigger than his thumb. And it wasn't until the 80s that it became, it wasn't until the 70s and the 80s that it became illegal for a woman to be battered by her husband. It wasn't until very recently, in the last 30 years, that the concept of marital rape, that it was the notion that a husband couldn't rape. I mean, that was there was no such thing, right? A husband, she was his property, so he could do whatever he wanted. Certainly it wasn't until 1920, this is the anniversary of the 100-year anniversary of women gaining the right to vote, right, in some countries. And ironically, Kansas was one of the first states to legally give women the right to vote. It wasn't school board elections, but nonetheless. And then in some parts of the world, women still don't have freedom of movement. They can't own their own, they can't keep their own wages. They have to get permission. They're not considered a full person in some parts of the world. And that's what we mean by gender stratification. Women in politics, the image there, illustrates that women are, so the idea in the 1920s was that if women got the right to vote, that they would go out and vote in droves and they would change the makeup of the political landscape, and that's not what happened. They did vote, but they didn't vote any differently than their husbands. They often voted in the same way that their husbands. But what you see when you look across American politics is that women are, for instance, currently at the school board I think they're all women except for two men. So we have women outnumber men on the Manhattan Ogden School Board. But as you move up through these different levels, you see fewer and fewer women. You know, we have yet to see a female president. We've yet to see a female vice president, for criminy's sake. That's what sociologists and others refer to as a glass ceiling. So the glass ceiling is this notion that women can get so high and they can see it, right? They're so close to the top that they can see the ceiling. The ceiling is glass, but they can't break through that, right? Versus what's referred to as a glass escalator. And the glass escalator is associated with when men enter female dominated occupations, they very quickly get promoted. A classic one is education. Teaching has long been associated with women. Now, as far back as the 1880s, if a woman she could only be a teacher until she got married. And once she got married, she had to quit her job watching Little House on the Prairie, and you see those stories. But when men entered women's occupations, they very quickly become, I can think of when I was teaching at the technical college, nursing is predominantly female, but when there would be a male student, he would be voted like president of the class, or he would be, outstanding student. But at the same time, when women would enter male dominated trades like auto body or building trades, they would be marginalized or harassed. I know of one instance where she was sexually harassed to the point where she left the program. So again, the consequence of gender stratification is that men can move into feminine occupations, but women don't have the same opportunities. But so that's sort of what that slide. There's also a really important phrase that I hope makes some sense. It's what they say: the personal is political. And what is meant by the personal is political is that decisions about women's bodies, in particular reproduction, I'll just say what it is, are being decided in political settings. So there are an abundance of legislation being written about women's access to birth control or women's access to reproductive technologies. But when women are not in the political arena to make those decisions about women's bodies, which are personal decisions, how I control my own reproduction is a personal decision, but they are being decided in the political arena. So it's said that the personal has become political, and this is particularly troubling to equity scholars when what they see is the people that are making those decisions don't look like them. A room full of men making decisions about what happens in my uterus. That's what we mean by the personal is political. So another really important word that we talk about is reproductive freedom. I'll get to that, I think, probably in the next lecture. Another fun question to ask, bonus point if you know the answer to this one: who is the most powerful woman in American politics? What is the name of the woman that has held the most powerful position? Often students will say Hillary Clinton, but that's not the answer. Hillary Clinton was elected senator. She was Secretary of State, but the Secretary of State was an appointed position by the president. The most powerful political position in the history of American politics is Nancy Pelosi. And Nancy Pelosi is currently, and this is her second time, she is the third in charge. You have the president, which is a male, the vice president, which is a male, and Nancy Pelosi, as Speaker of the House, would become the president in the event that something happened to the president and the vice president who sits in the Senate. It's a fun trivia question. Moving on to the next slide. Patriarchy. Patriarchy simply means male domination. And there's a couple pretty cool theories as to how our society, or how modern society has become, or what led to its patriarchal. One theory is that it originated with hand-to-hand combat. So going back to hunting and gathering societies where tribes might get into a conflict, and the conflict would have been hand-to-hand fighting. Well, the best soldiers would have been the people that had more muscle mass, which probably would have been men, the masculinely men. When they would win, as they would take their women as prisoners. The irony here is that even in contemporary war times, this is still a practice, that when one group wins victory over another group, they may rape their women or kidnap their women and their children. So one theory is that the way men came to be in charge of women is that women were the prize. They were the prize. Another theory suggests that it also goes evolutionarily. It goes back to hunting and gathering times, and that because of women, let me see if it's on this handout, the relationship to reproduction. I'm not sure if it's on there. Yes, it is. Social consequences of reproduction. And the theory goes like this: is because women were the ones whose bellies would get big and the babies, and men were the ones whose, because of their physiology, they would go out and hunt. So women stayed close to the tribe, men went out and hunted. Her relationship to reproduction, the fact that she carried the offspring and she birthed the offspring, limited her movement around space. Because he had a different role, he would go out into the world, he would hunt the bison, he would meet other tribes, and he then became more worldly. So women became associated with the home, men became associated with going out and about. You fast forward, 2 millennia, and you end up with the same pattern. Sociologists like to say that made sense where it came from, but why is it still with us, right? Women don't have to have babies. Men can nurture babies, can take care of babies. So they argue that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Another theory, though, what's referred to as is that patriarchy is maintained generation after generation. Remember, that is called social reproduction. that it's maintained generation after generation because the ideas are passed down. So a daughter watches her father make all the financial decisions. She watches her mother take care of the cooking and the cleaning, and she learns the gender role of women take care of the cooking and cleaning. I will marry a man who will make all the financial decisions, and it gets passed into the next generation, right? From one generation. Another theory, of course, is that women have fewer opportunities outside the home. So they stay in the home, that the structure inhibits their ability to choose to make other choices. And then another theory, another phrase goes something like the devaluation of things feminine. That effectively that all things associated with being feminine are given less social value. So women internalize this sort of sense that they are less than, that they can't do everything that needs to be done without, or meet all of their needs without a husband, or yeah, without a husband to help take care of them. So patriarchy, male dominated society. A fun question is, as opposed to matriarchy, right? Matriarchy is the idea of a female dominated society, and all over the world there are all over the world we see, except for a couple, there's some groups that appear to be matriarchal in some aspects of their organization, but the higher positions, anthropologists tell us, are always held by men.